This is Patrick Murray on a breezy day here in Houston, Texas at the Johnson Space Center. I haven't been here in 11 years, and I'll tell you what, the last time I was here, I didn't see that behind me. Not this massive combination of a 747 with the Shuttle Independence on top of it. To my recollection, the Shuttle Independence was sort of the sister shuttle to the experimental Shuttle Enterprise from 1977. This is amazing! It's huge, it's massive, and it's what you'd expect here at the Johnson Space Center. As of right now, I'm about to make a beeline for the exhibit room with all the space capsules in it. So let's go check that out, shall we?
Here we are at the early space flight hall, and what do our eyes behold but Gordon Cooper's Faith 7. This was the last of the Mercury missions to fly into space, and in so doing it also set a flight duration record for Project Mercury at 30 hours in flight. It lasted so long that Gordon Cooper was actually the only astronaut to actually sleep in flight during a Mercury spacecraft mission. Pretty cool unto itself. Also, a lot of other cool things too, such as a full-scale model of Explorer 1, which was the first satellite America actually launched into space, January 31st, 1958. But hey, it gets even cooler than that. Over here, you've got a full-scale model of the first ever liquid fuel rocket that Robert Goddard launched in March of 1926 in Auburn, Massachusetts. But that's just foreplay. That's just, you know, the preliminary stuff right here. Although they do show a really nice cutaway behind the heat shield of some of the apparatus inside of Gordon Cooper's Faith 7. That's really cool unto itself. But then, look up, look up, look up, and what do our eyes behold but the Gemini 5? Gordon Cooper was also part of the Gemini 5 mission, he along with Pete Conrad. And the mantra for that mission was 8 days or bust, because they made it 8 days in space flight, which was a new space flight duration record for the time. Now, of course, that would be quickly eclipsed during the Gemini 7 space flight mission with Frank Borman and Jim Lovell, which lasted for 2 weeks. So take a look inside this baby, will you? You're basically looking at a space that's about the size of the front seat of a Volkswagen Beetle. Now try imagining lasting 8 days inside that small cramped space. Now further imagine the Gemini 7 crew of Lovell and Borman lasting 2 weeks inside that thing. Yeah, took guts, but they pulled it off. But then it gets better yet. Check it out, check it out, check it out. The Apollo 17. This was the last of the Apollo missions to the moon. The call sign for this command module was America, and this was the crew was commander of Gene Cernan. You had Harrison Schmitt, who was the lunar module pilot, and you also had Ron Evans, who was the command module pilot. And they recovered so many moon rocks and so much fascinating geological data during this trip. It was definitely a great way to cap off the Apollo lunar missions. This is such a fantastic exhibit hall in here, and I can never get enough of it. It's so good to see this again. It really is. If you ever have the chance to go down here and come see this, do so. You will be very glad that you did. Another little treat we have here on display is a full-scale model, mock-up model, of an Apollo lunar module. That's always a treat to see. It's always an amazing thing. It gives you an idea of how big they were, how big the ladder was that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin crawled down on when they first set foot on the moon. It's just an amazing thing to behold. It's so cool. Ladies and gentlemen, look at this. This is something that's also incredibly intriguing. They actually have a mock-up of an Orion spacecraft here. This is so cool. Take a look inside. Looks so much more plush than the command module interiors, that's for darn sure. It also looks simpler. The only instrumentation panel I can immediately discern is right there, and I'm not quite sure if that's an accurate reflection of what the interiors are going to be like or not, but it's just so incredibly intriguing, and it just makes me just so much more intrigued about how these spacecraft are going to function when they're going to be sent up into space in the reasonably near future, from what I understand. So let's all stay tuned on this, because this could lead to one fascinating development after another. How cool is this? It turns out that Independence that we saw outside was not a real shuttle, and I thought that was the case. And indeed, it's a mock-up. And this is what it looks like inside a cargo bay of that space shuttle. They even, they're very thoughtful in their details. Notice here, this Canadian robot arm. The Canadian government gave this to NASA as a gift, and it's been utilized to the utmost over the years. Note this is obviously a mock-up of the arm, but it shows you a general idea of the size and the functional capacity of this very, very important device that NASA has used on the shuttle through the years. So cool.
Here we are aboard the SCA, which, in case you didn't know, stands for Shuttle Carrier Aircraft. Yes, that's that massive 747 that we saw outside at the beginning. Here we are inside of it right now. This, folks, is the real thing. This actually ferried the shuttles from landings at Edwards Air Force Base back to Cape Canaveral and other ferryings as well. This is amazing. And yes, it has that old plane smell to it. Breathe it in. Nothing like that old plane smell. It's just like nothing like that old classic car smell that you enjoy if you sit behind the seat, behind the wheel of, in the back seat or behind the wheel of a 1940s or 1950s car. It's got that old car smell to it. Well, this has that old plane smell, and it's delightful. This whole place is delightful. What can I say? It's great. If you have a chance to, and you're here in Houston, come to see this place. You'll never regret it. It'll be one of the greatest things you see in a long time. This is wonderful.
Here's another view of it, this time without having to see my mug, getting in front of the camera and hogging the view of what it looks like inside this most intriguing and most interesting historical vehicle. Very, very cool. And yes, still breathing, still taking in that old plane smell. It seems as though a trip to the NASA Space Center is not complete without paying homage here at the historic Mission Control. It was here, where that was the central nervous system for all the amazing historic flights for Gemini, Apollo, and even the early space shuttle missions. This was a central nervous system where Flight Director Gene Kranz oversaw mission control operations for the Apollo 11 flight when the Eagle had landed on the moon, or the Apollo 13 flight when we brought the astronauts home. It all happened here. And that very box atop the Public Affairs Officer console that you see right there, that is where they first heard the famous words, "Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed," among other many famous sayings as well, such as "Houston, we have a problem" from Apollo 13. This, folks, is where it happened. And I, for one, am amazed. Wow. Folks, get a load of this. Just when you think you've seen all the cool stuff, it turns out there's so much more cool stuff here to see. And look, and there's no greater example of that than this Saturn V rocket you are seeing right here. What an incredible sight to behold. They have all 3 stages here out on display, all separate, so you can see each separate stage in all of its glory, even a command module, a mock-up service module, and even the adapter sections, so you can see what it looked like inside of the section that housed the lunar modules before they hooked up to the CSM. What the size alone is just jaw-droppingly amazing. Here on the other side, as you can see, they have poster after poster of all the Apollo space missions. You can see they're all chronicled. Apollo 1, Apollo 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 17. They show photos from each mission, as well as the highlights of each one, and of course the proper commemorations of the Apollo 1, since that ended in disaster and tragedy. It's a wonderful thing to behold. If you want to learn about Apollo missions, this is practically ground zero. What we're seeing here is the top end of the final, i.e. third stage of the Saturn V rocket. And what's so amazing is when you get up close, there's all this intricate piping, all this intricate wiring, just for the top of the stage of such a rocket, of such a large object. The engineering that went into here is just nothing short of amazing. It's amazing how they designed this. It's amazing how they put this all together. And even more amazing when you consider that all they had to design these things were slide rules. Gotta hand it to old Werner von Braun now, don't we? If you've ever wondered what it looked like inside the adapter section of the rocket to an Apollo CSM, this is what it looked like. This is the type of adapter section you saw between the final stage of the Saturn V and the Apollo and the CSM that took the Apollo 8 astronauts to the moon. It was empty on the inside, but during subsequent missions, such as, say, the Apollo 10 and onward through Apollo 17, this is what housed the lunar module, the LEM, the LEM. Notice all the again, the intricate piping and the intricate tubing and the intricate wiring and all the obscure devices everywhere. You wouldn't think all this would have been an empty carrying adapter section, but no, it's just as elaborate as the previous section, if not even more so. This is very eye-opening indeed. And it's awe-inspiring as to how this is all designed and put together. Again, just using slide rules. To be perfectly frank and honest, what really intrigues people about this amazing Saturn V rocket is the business end of that Saturn V rocket. Notice all these grooved lines that were put in place to keep the inflamed fuel liquid that was being spent on course as it was exiting the nozzle at greater than supersonic speed in order to generate the necessary amount of thrust to put this massive object and the astronauts into space towards the moon. What's even more amazing is if you look at these absolutely massive engines and nozzles, that they were at least 4 out of 5 of these, if not the entire 5, were designed to gyre and gimbal, meaning that they could move around so that either the automated guidance system, or if that went out, the astronauts themselves could actually guide the rocket itself, and so that it would actually stay on course and move the nozzles accordingly so it would stay on course. A lot easier said than done.
I'm growing weary of your presence.
What a massive tribute to human ingenuity. And I, for one, remain amazed.
Behind me, what you see is a small rocket garden, which is just right outside of the Saturn building we were just in. What you see behind me are, for example, the Little Joe 2 rocket. That was the rocket that experimentally launched some Apollo space capsule mock-ups, but were primarily used to test out the escape towers, the escape rocket towers, on top of those Apollo capsules. And they allowed, and they helped verify the fact that they did indeed work, thankfully, though we thankfully did not need to use them in real life, in reality. Also behind me, what you see is a Mercury Redstone rocket and a Mercury capsule mock-up or early prototype right behind me as well. Those right there were the rockets that were used to launch both Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom into space. And it's just amazing to think about you getting inside, if you're one of those astronauts, getting inside that tiny capsule on top of that rocket, and then hurtling yourself via that modified ICBM up into space and be the first Americans to do so. That, folks, took guts. And that, folks, commands our respect even more than 50 years after the fact.
Indeed, this entire complex is a tribute to the bravery and pioneering spirit of the astronauts who risked so much to push back the frontiers of space exploration. The astronauts of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs accomplished so much with technology that would be rather primitive by today's standards, which reminds us that they made up for the lesser technology with the guts to keep forging ahead. But this place is also, by that same token, a tribute to scientific advancements and good old American know-how that made such exploration possible in the first place, and shall make further exploration possible in the years to come. Needless to say, Space Center Houston is without a doubt a travel destination, and is most certainly worth spending a whole day here to engage in learning. Well, that's all for this episode. Keep checking back for more, and until the next time, keep exploring, keep discovering, keep growing, and keep learning.